Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and how wonderful to see so many of you here at a pre-show. My name is Kate Mosse. I'm a playwright and a novelist and the biographer of CFT, and the gentleman on my right needs no introduction, because of course he is Daniel Evans, the director of this wonderful theatre, and more importantly, right now, the director of this wonderful show. Now, all of you who are old-fashioned, proper musical theatre fans, and particularly lovers of Chichester, will know that putting on the sort of music for which Chichester has become so well known, and Daniel Evans himself from Sheffield and many other places is also well known, takes a lot of hard work. So this evening we're going to whip through as much as we can, but we only have, I'm afraid, 35 minutes on the stage. So we will talk fast, then if you've got a question, ask it, and we're going to shoot through and then give the stage back to the actors to warm up. Daniel, welcome to your own theatre. It always feels really stupid doing that. I suppose the obvious question is, it is such a classic piece of work, Fiddler on the Roof. This is a brand new staging, and all of these things we'll talk about in a moment. But is this a particular show that you have always wanted to direct as a director of music theatre, as well as street shows, as it were? Or has something happened to make this the show for now for you?
I wouldn't say always, because it's one of the pieces that I didn't really know it as a child. Lots of people grew up watching the film.
Well, you weren't really born, were you? I'm just saying, sorry. Some of us were. In the 60s.
But it was never passed on to me. It wasn't one of those films that was always playing at certain times of the year in our household, like, say, The Sound of Music. Or, so I came to it late, and I came to it a few years ago when I was just doing my research on musicals. And then I guess it was actually getting the job here and thinking, what piece would I like our first main house musical to be? And I was aware particularly of the events that were happening in the Middle East and Europe last summer and last spring, where we were seeing families, groups of people being ousted from their homelands and risking their lives, leaving war-torn places and risking their lives to go to safe places. And that is, of course, something it doesn't quite correlate to what happens at the end of Fiddler on the Roof, but nevertheless, a dominant culture ousts a minority culture that are living amongst them, and they then have to go on this very long journey. And some of them, most of them, don't make it. Not that the musical shows that. So I felt that there was a pertinence to it. I also loved the main theme of the musical, which to me is about how modernity and tradition have to be in conflict and have to live side by side. And that's something that I think every generation meets as one ages. And so I thought that it would be an interesting piece for CFT to do, given the breadth of its audience and the passion of its audience for great musicals like Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes, and with, I mean, your theme, yours and Rachel Tackley's theme of your first season together has been change. And with that, as in with Caroline or Change, that many people would have seen the first musical in the Minerva, that sense of how you keep the best of yourself or your traditions and then at the same time move forward. So many people in this audience will know the great classics of Fiddler on the Roof, obviously Matchmaker, obviously, you know, If I Were a Rich Man, Sunrise, Sunset. But for me, when it started, the way you set out your stall with that first number tradition, I found incredibly powerful and moving. So did the choice of Fiddler actually start to influence the idea of a theme for the whole season? You know, which came first, chicken or egg with this?
I'm going to be totally honest and say that the
theme... Hadn't occurred to you.
No, it did occur to us, but really almost retrospectively. When Rachel and I were in one of our meeting rooms with all our post-it notes on the table of what could be our first season, and we were slowly, you know, eliminating like that game of pairs. You know, we were slowly trying to eliminate the things that we were trying to distill a season. It emerged quite late on in our choice that actually there was a strand, and part of that strand was about change. But then all drama, all good drama, in a way, deals with change because all scenes are units of drama that enact some form of change, and that change is about to tip over and create conflict and tension, because without that, drama really does not exist. You're just watching people being very happy, which isn't very dramatic. And so throughout, in each instance in the season, you can see great tipping points where either individuals or communities are being forced to face difficult, uncomfortable truths about themselves or about their situation that causes great change in their ways of life.
So you've talked about there being a resonance that you felt when you started to look back, and of course it's set in 1905, even though of course it first was on in the 60s and written after the Second World War and all of the things that have happened. Did you, when you thought, you know, this could be my first musical here for CFT, and you have a great track record yourself in other places, did you have a clear idea of how you wanted to do it, how you wanted to have it designed, where you would be fighting against previous productions that people might have in their mind, and where you were going to set it free? Or did that evolve as you started to read and think of casting and move on?
How we did it really evolved from how we are currently doing it evolved from a conversation with Les Brotherston, the designer.
It's astonishing design, beautiful. I'm
glad you think so, yes. And Les, of course, is vastly experienced. He does all of Matthew Bourne's work, so he knows, really is expert at actors or dancers and how they move in space. And Les and I had a very, very early meeting where we were thinking about what does this piece mean to us now, and how can we give it a freshness and bring it to a modern audience and make it sing. And we started with the end. Because of what happens at the end, we imagined what would happen if the villagers of Anatevka, which is the fictional village in which the piece is set, if they all packed up everything that we'd seen throughout the evening and carried it with them off stage. And that's something that we've managed to follow through. And then, of course, we said, well, if that's how we end, then we shall also start with an empty space. And then those conversations then were shared with our lighting designer, the great David Hersey, who is a legend of a lighting designer and a wonderful collaborator. And
Alistair, Alistair, what is the choreography is exquisite throughout, but it has to be very brilliant to be that simple. Sometimes you're just thinking, how are they doing that?
Well, in a way, one of the things that we were both battling with, Alistair and I, was the fact that the original production and the film was choreographed by the great Jerry Robbins, who was a Broadway legend, hero, certainly a hero of mine. And you know, he was the original director and choreographer of West Side Story, and so created such iconic work that is immortalized on film. Yeah. And that can be quite a heavy pressure. It can be a very present ghost, if you like. And again, we had to, in a way, forget those images. Luckily, Alistair had never seen the film. And I'd never seen a production that included the Robbins choreography. Right. I'd seen a production, but a long time ago. And so, in a way, we did feel like we could have a clean slate. But it really is a team effort, particularly so in a musical, because there are so many more collaborators and many more elements. And I feel that particularly on this show, we've all come together in the last 3 weeks. The cast were rehearsing way before that, of course, but as a creative team, we've come together to make this piece very, very collectively.
And you've just raised that issue of the shadow of some of the great connections that many of us have with Fiddler on the Roof. So can we just talk a little bit about the central casting? Obviously, Tracy-Ann Oberman is so well known to Chichester audiences and very beloved here. Wonderful, wonderful performance. And I was blown away by Omar Jalili's performance as Teve. But of course, now the challenge for him and for you, presumably, is for many of us who are a little older, Daniel, that sense of Topol, you know, one of the great, famous, single-word actors, so famous, just only needs one word. Now, with that sort of thing, how do you decide what is, between you, a new authentic performance? How has he made the role his own, and how have you helped him to do that? Because I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I thought they were brilliant together, but it was a wonderful, wonderful performance.
The casting of Omid was interesting because there are many, many cultural sensitivities around casting now, as you can imagine, and rightly so, because people's identity has become a very a nuanced subject. And so the place where I started was really who in our world now of actors can carry the mantle of Zero Mostel, who played the part originally on Broadway. And then that mantle was handed to Topol, who became even more famous for the part, really, than Mostel, partly because of the film. And he also, Topol went on playing it for many, many years, and every revival, sometimes 20 years would pass, and then he'd come back and still play it. And which must have been fascinating for him. Well, no, I mean that generally. And I was thinking, who also has that kind of silhouette? And I mean literally that silhouette. and who has that ability to be very, very funny, but also to give that kind of stubborn masculinity, which Tevye has, who also has that warmth, that person who could convey a love towards a wife and 5 daughters that felt generous, but at the same time that could also convey the part of Tevye that's constantly whinging to God about his lame horse. And I didn't know Omid, but I knew his comedy work, I knew his stand-up work, and I'd been to see some of his shows. And indeed, I saw his last tour, which was entitled Schmuck for a Night. And Omid's comedy, I don't know if some of you have seen it, but Omid's comedy is often based on exposing racism and prejudice for the ridiculous reasons that often lay behind it. And so, in Omid's show, everyone gets it in the neck. The night I went, I don't know if it was especially for me, but even the Welsh got it in the neck. Which, I was quite happy for, because, he just takes the mick out of everyone and does it with such wit and humour and naughtiness that I thought...
So not spiteful, that's...
It's not spiteful. No. And it's not spiteful because you end up... He's very, very provocative as a stand-up. He makes you laugh, and he's able to say things that not many people would dare to say because of this cultural sensitivity. But he's saying it in such a way that is... that somehow he gets away with it by making us laugh. And he manages to, burst the boil of many taboos. And so it became clear that he was one of those actors, and they're very, very rare, there are very few of them, who could embody all those elements that I've talked about and could really hold the mantle, which again is another ghost, of Zero Mostel and Topol. And as for Tracy-Ann, she'd been here, of course, last autumn. Some of you may have seen her in Stepping Out, in which she was wonderful. And, you make a list, and Tracy-Ann was top of my list, and luckily she wrote to me and said, I heard you're doing Fiddler on the Roof. This is my grandmother's story. And so I was able to call her agent and say, well, I've had this wonderful note from Tracy-Ann, and she was, top of my list, and could we have a cup of tea? And the minute I met her properly and heard her speak about her connection with her grandmother and the connection with this story, as she has said in many interviews, the piece almost feels, for her grandmother, the piece felt like documentary. And so what Tracy-Ann brings is this incredible knowledge and connection, which we've lent on a lot in rehearsals, because she was able to guide us with all the detail of the Jewish culture that we've attempted to imbue this production with. So,
and I mean, we obviously just need to say something, of course, it being a piece of music theatre, about the music, as well as Alistair David's amazing choreography, Tom Brady's musical direction, the quality of the sound and the bigness of those great ensemble pieces. You also have possibly the best violinist I've ever heard. You know, the fiddler on the roof. He's in the building. So with that sort of thing, with a piece of music theatre, we've talked about two central big acting performances. But of course, all of those big ensemble scenes, it all comes down to that. So how do you go about casting the fiddler, actually, which is a musical role, but it's so central to everything? And how have you made this score your own? Because it is a restaging, and that it feels very vibrant and fresh in the music, as well as everything else. Well,
we were incredibly lucky on two counts. We were given permission by the estate of the three families, Bach, Harnick, and Stein, the lyricist, the composer, and the dialogue, the book writer. We were given permission to have new orchestrations and new choreography. For the main part, productions, what they call first-class productions like this is, normally have to toe the line and recreate the Jerome Robbins choreography, and we were given permission to start afresh, which is very very rare and very amazing. And we were lucky that I'd already worked with the great David White, who is a musical director and supervisor, composer and orchestrator before. And David, when we were talking about the new orchestrations, David said, would you consider me for these orchestrations? And I leapt at the chance. And what David has done is to research klezmer music. You know, I don't know if you know that term, but it's music that's based on a Yiddish or Jewish idiom. And David has imbued all of our orchestrations and started afresh totally, and has imbued the whole sound world with that cultural and particular timbre, which gives it hopefully an authenticity, which you'll hear. And then Dee and Tom worked together to form the band. And I know, for example, with the fiddler, we were wondering, were we going to be able to find someone who was going to be able to play the fiddle on stage, sometimes in precarious places, without giving too much away. But you can guess, the clue's in the title. And in fact, I know there was quite a big search, and there was a particular YouTube clip that they shared with each other and with me of Darius, our violinist, playing in something similar to a klezmer band, and everyone just said, well, that's the sound we want. Luckily for us, then, it turned out that Darius, I think I'm right in saying that Darius's parents are actors, so he knew the world very, very well, or our world, and really threw himself in to everything we've asked of him. And for us to have that quality of playing in those places in the staging, it has been wonderful for us. And it felt like this wonderful sort of echo, the idea that people arrived with nothing, they left with everything but leaving nothing behind. But the one thing that linked everybody was that mournful note, you know, the tune that went through everything. And that felt very powerful. And around me when I saw it, there were quite a lot of people snivelling at the end, which I think is always good. You want people to laugh and possibly cry a bit. Have you enjoyed doing it? Has it been the show that you imagined it in your head when you first thought about it? I've learned. I know you've not opened yet. So. No, that's true. And I've also learned it's whatever you imagine early on, the fact that you work with with great people means that they always make it better than you think it was going to be. And this more than anything else is a team effort. I have very, very few chats with David Hersey, who seems to be able to read one's mind, because you're in the middle of the technical rehearsal and David somehow has managed to capture an image that you hoped would read, and he's made it 1,000 times better. And that has gone for every member of the team. Have I enjoyed it? Yes, I've enjoyed it. There have been challenges. We were rehearsing in London in a place with a glass roof on the hottest week of the year. And so there was one day where we had to send the actors home at 4 p.m. because it was 36 degrees in the room. We were very unfortunate that one of our wonderful actors playing Laser Wolf received some news about his health and had to withdraw during the technical rehearsals.
So, I mean, 2 days before you were actually due to let the audience in. I mean, really.
On the Friday,
yeah.
And we knew that we had 1,300 people coming on the Monday, and so we found an actor. He learnt it overnight. We rehearsed with him on the Saturday. He was finishing his performances of Romeo and Juliet at the Globe. He had 2 of them on Sunday, came to us on Monday and was on that Monday night and was off book.
Yes, you would never have known that he had totally learned it.
And you know, Gareth, his name is Gareth Snook, and he's now had a bit more rehearsal. And
so he's saying the words in the book rather than the ones he thought.
Yeah. Actually, he was quite perfect.
He was brilliant.
He was dead letter perfect on his first performance. And actors are amazing like that. You know, actors really are people who can step into the breach like that and do amazing things when they put their minds to it. And Gareth certainly
of course,
did.
it is a wonderful, you know, many of the long-standing members of the audience will know that there is a great Chichester tradition of shows having to suddenly go on or change right at the last moment, and they become the shows that everybody will say, I was there on that Monday night, you know, and that will be part of the folklore. And so I think you've done that very well to have that in your first season.
I think that's partly why on that Monday night I felt it was important for Gareth's sake and for our sake and for the audience's sake that, you know, to make a speech, which I did, just to explain our situation, just in case anything went very wrong, which it didn't. Thank God, I'm touching wood. So have I enjoyed it? Yes, I have. I've really loved working with the cast. It's one of the best ensembles that I've ever worked with, if not the best. They've been incredible.
Quality is amazing all the way through, I would say.
Well, and what the sounds that David and Tom have been able to get from them, particularly in the choral singing, particularly towards the end of the show, has moved me also, and their commitment. And I hope it's the kind of show where the audience get to know and love every single one of the characters, because everyone gets a go at some point. It's brilliantly written to offer opportunities to everyone in the cast. And so...
For those of you who haven't yet seen it, you have a treat, but there is one surreal moment with a fantastic performance from the wonderful Laura Tebbett in the middle of that, and that looked like you had fun.
Yes, there's one moment where Tevye has a dream, and because it's a dream... Well, because it's a dream to begin with, but in this case, it's also a dream that he's made up. So we felt that there was license to be perhaps even more fantastical than usual. And if you've seen it yet, I hope you'll forgive any campness, because there's smoke and other elements which I won't spoil. But that's something actually worth saying, is that we've been so fortunate, and this is really a tribute to Chichester and those that have gone before me with the musical productions here, is that we were lucky to get someone like Laura, who really is a leading actress, and particularly in musicals because she has the most sensational belt voice. She can do it all, but her belt is particularly thrilling to hear. And she said yes, that she would come and play what is... Well, there are no small parts, as they say, only small actors, and she accepted this part and she's made it something wonderful. And that's true of Mia Soteriou, who's also playing Grand Mozzaitle in the same sequence. And the ensemble is littered with people who have played leading roles in the West End for a while and have said yes because they want to come and work in Chichester. And that's a great tribute, I think, to this theatre.
Yes, and it feels like it when you're in the audience. Now, we're going to have a few questions. If I could have the house lights up a bit. While you're all just preparing, just one question for you with your other hat on as the director of the theatre. It's all been so full. You can't walk past the theatre right from 40 years on without people sort of barging you out the way, and there's been a lovely atmosphere. Is it possible for you to enjoy being a director without your I am the artistic director hat on, or do you always have your eye over there and over there? Can you enjoy your press night tomorrow as a director, or is it always just going to be you as the theatre director too?
I'll enjoy press night once the show is over. And particularly if it's been a good show, then I will enjoy. But I've learnt now, over the years that you can focus, and then in the times when you're not in the rehearsal room, you're often having breakfast meetings or lunchtime meetings or evening meetings, or going to the theatre to see other people's work. But I'm also lucky that there's a brilliant team, and Rachel holds the fort back here while I'm in the rehearsal room, and the team too are so talented, and they look after me. And I'm very grateful for that.
So you find that okay to switch backwards and forwards? You don't want to just be able to fall on a puddle floor tomorrow night?
No, it's part of what
I'll let you know if he does, ladies and gents.
It's part of what I've come to enjoy is that variety. And it's almost, a change is as good as the rest. And so, when, for example, Sam Garner-Gibbons, our technical director, came and said, we've got to test the fire door at the back. And we, had to work around it in the tech. And Carolyn, our sound designer, said to me, oh, yeah, that's your other hat, isn't it? I suppose you have to also think about those things. And that's just part of running a theatre, and that's great. Well, it's been wonderful so far. There is no doubt about it. Right, hand in the air. Anybody who would like to ask a question? Greg, thank you very much.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi there.
I appreciate it's not the first time you've directed here in the main house, because obviously you were directing 40 years on earlier in the season. But it's the first time, I believe, that you've directed a musical in this particular house, and you've referred to quite a number of the cast coming from West End theatres. Any particular challenges that you want to tell us about that relate to the theatre stage here and your casting?
Thank you. There have been two big challenges, I think, for me. And the one is really learning the auditorium. And I think that I hope that my learning will continue as long as I get to direct in it, because it's a challenging auditorium. Luckily, I spent 7 years in Sheffield, which is also a thrust space, but was built 10 years after this. And there are significant changes. For example, the VOMs, these entrances, the actors in Sheffield don't share them with the audience. They're part of the stage. So if I can stand up, they start here, and the VOMs go down underneath the audience. And that makes bringing things up from those places much, much easier than it is here. You have to be careful what furniture you choose to bring up here, because there are corners to go around. So if you choose a chaise longue, you've got to really practice it. And there are other elements, which is that I'm learning that this is probably a better place to stand because of this stairwell than here, because you're going to be masking this bank of seats, and similarly on the other side. So because I love directing in thrust, because I feel like the actors that I choose also enjoy it, because they enjoy having to act in 360 degrees, as it were, even though there's no audience there. Although, as you know now, there will be in the Norman Conquests, because we're going fully into the round, which is really exciting. There are particular challenges that come with thrust spaces, and sight lines is one of them, because if you really want the piece to feel present in the house, particularly when you've got a piece that's about a community, you don't want always the community to be back there. You want us to feel like we're making you part of the community, and that means bringing actors out into the space, which I know this place has done many, many times in Enemy of the People brilliantly. But that's been a challenge. And the second thing is, for any sound designer working here, and Carolyn has done brilliantly, we've had a journey, is that the sound on a thrust, particularly in a musical, is hard. Our band is up here and revealed at a certain point, but to make sure that most or everyone in the house is getting a similar kind of sonic experience is really challenging. And we've been listening to our audience throughout previews, asking them if they've said, oh, this sounds a bit too loud, the band's a bit too loud, or the actors are too loud at that point. We've been asking them where they've been sitting, and then we've been sitting in that area the following night to hear what they've been hearing in order to tweak the sound.
Amazing. Thank you. Another question.
I came to the technical rehearsal of 40 Years On, and what struck me so much about you was when you're directing, the calmness and the overall, you just kept the piece so beautifully, even though there was one outburst. And I'm just wondering how much the cast here must appreciate that, because I thought if I were on the stage, I would so love to be directed by you. So Does it always, is it the same for you with fiddlers?
Well, you'd have to ask them if they were appreciative of it. All I will say is this. I trained as an actor. And so I guess what you see on the outside is not necessarily what's going on the inside. And so I've said this before, and I'll say it again, is that one of the things that I try as a director is to try and banish tension, because tension is a killer. And I learned that from Richard Wilson, who is my favourite director. And Richard, when he directs, I don't know how, manages to stay so calm and so cool. I wish I could do the same, and I don't always. I think some of you who were at the technical, I think you did hear me raise my voice to the 60 children at one point. But they were doing something very wrong, which I had told them about 10 times before. So I guess the more you practice, the more you get to hide the desperation that's going on inside, the panic that sometimes goes on inside, and just try to keep everything calm.
Wonderful. Is there a last question for Daniel? Thank you.
I'm aware that you've got people monitoring the production so far from the rights holders. Have you had any feedback from them?
Not yet. They don't visit us until later. But we have had, so far, I'm glad to say, we've had some wonderful audience feedback. And that's been very uplifting, and I think the cast in particular have been buoyed up by that. I know our audience aren't necessarily tweeters, or many of you aren't on Twitter. I encourage you to go on Twitter. It's great fun. But actually, there's been a little shift with our musical, and I wonder because maybe perhaps we also have a younger musical theatre audience that are very loyal and come and enjoy tweeting about, and we've had some blogs and reviews already online. So, no, the day the estate will come, that will be a big day for us.
I mean, that was a lovely question, because actually that's part of, as a way of finishing it off, a production like this, of course it won 9 Tonys when it was first on Broadway, then it came into London, and then it's been revived backwards and forwards. It is one of those productions that you put your marker down. So the warmth that seems to be about the production already, sure must be absolutely wonderful for you.
Well, touch wood.
Touch wood. You keep doing that. I'm not sure this is wood.
It is wood.
I think that was a cheap bit of thing from the prop department. Everybody here obviously is passionate about musicals, and you are a great musical director, as we know, and Chichester loves the musicals. I can't honestly think of a better choice for your first one here. And I think I can speak on behalf of everybody, really hoping that you have the most wonderful press night tomorrow. You have an incredible company, and it deserves to be one of those wonderful, wonderful experiences. But I think just for now, ladies and gentlemen, can you thank your director, Daniel Evans?